Let's start with Jordan Westburg, rostered in about half of Yahoo leagues. Westburg was maybe competing for playing time in a crowded Orioles infield, but now that Jackson Holliday's not there, Westburg should be free to be nearly an everyday player. But I guess the question here is, Ryan, is he an exciting one in shallower leagues? Because you're not going to be able to pick him up in deeper ones because he's already on somebody's roster.
I think he's fairly exciting. I'm kicking myself a little bit about not rostering him in any leagues because, as you mentioned, it seemed like he was competing for a job, but doesn't definitely seem like he has a job now. Started a DH on opening day, started at second base in their second game. Could bounce around a little bit, pick up additional position eligibility would be nice, but the left field wall in Baltimore is going to hurt, but he's got power, he's got a little bit of speed, and I think he's certainly capable of providing mixed league value.
So in a 12, are we going like 10%, something like that, or more just 5 or 6 or less?
Probably more the latter, I would say.
Yeah, I think I'm there with you. I think I'd go maybe 5 or 6%. Because if I miss out on him and just have to get a guy, I think he's not far above that line. Another guy who will be picked up in your deep leagues, but not necessarily in 12-team mixed leagues, Ceddanne Rafaela, an exciting speedster rookie who didn't necessarily show great plate discipline last year in his small sample in the big leagues. Questions about his hit tool, but certainly in a roto league where you need speed, he's a high potential guy. Comes in eligible at outfield and should maybe pick up infield eligibility too, depending on how the Red Sox use him. He may already have it if you use lower position threshold, so he could be useful in a number of ways. But just how useful is he? Is this guy over or under what you would bid on Jordan Westburg if you're looking for a middle infielder?
He's over. It'd probably be more like the 10% that you first mentioned. Yeah, the play discipline last year, not great, but was much better in the minors. Certainly the speed is going to play. He's not a big guy, so I don't know how much the power is ultimately going to carry over. He did hit for a good amount of power in the minors, and bats right-handed at Fenway, so that's going to help. Hitting a little lower in the order, but that's not a huge deal right now, I don't think. I think about 10% probably is about right for him.
Yep, I think I'm right there with you. Victor Scott, the buzziest outfielder of the spring, had quite a journey where first he was just a hyped up long shot, and then it looked like he might actually be on the team, and then he was sent down, and then there was one more injury, this time to Dylan Carlson, and he is indeed there. Now, of course, Victor Scott will have been picked up after that news if you're in a deep league that's had FAAB run already, but there's certainly plenty of leagues where he's still available tonight, even in the deeper ones. So would you be blowing the budget on Victor Scott? I mean, this might be easily a 10-15%.
Blowing the budget, no. I do worry that it could still be a short-term stay for him. You know, they're going to get, it sounds like they could get Newtbar back as soon as next week. Tommy Edmonds probably at least a couple weeks behind that. You know, Victor Scott will have the opportunity to show that he deserves that playing time, but you know, if when they get Edmund back, I'm just not sure what exactly they're going to do because it suddenly becomes pretty crowded. The stolen base potential, though, is just so high that I think he's worth at least maybe 15%, 20% of your FAAB just for that upside alone. What do you think?
Right. Yeah, because if it works out, you get last year's Asturi Ruiz season, which is the season people were paying for with the Asturi Ruiz this year. They were paying for even more than it. And if you want to get that guy who I'm not sure about the bat, but could be literally the league leader in steals or right up there, if Scott sticks around, that's the kind of upside we're talking about. A guy who's maybe less team specific, Will Benson of the Reds. He's a beneficiary of all the Reds injuries, I guess, in particular TJ Friedel not being there in the outfield. We actually did see Will Benson today in the lineup against a lefty, which means that he might be playing every day. He'll be gone in your 15-team leagues, but in a smaller mixed league, pretty exciting everyday player, good all-around potential here for Will Benson. How high would you be going on him?
Yeah, he would be at the top of the list of the guys we've mentioned so far. He's a really big guy, but like his speed is probably his best asset, but he's also got plenty of power as well, and he's going to be calling Great American Ballpark home, obviously. Did not see where he was batting in the lineup today, but he did he was batting second against a righty on opening day. So that was
ninth against a lefty.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, I kind of figured it would be towards the bottom, but just the fact that he's in the lineup at all against the lefty is encouraging. Yeah, it seemed like they were going to bat Ellie De La Cruz second, but he was down batting sixth on opening day. Benson up in the second spot, so that's a great spot for him to be in. Great situation in Cincinnati. I think he's worthy of a pretty healthy FAAB bid if he's still available.
So we're talking 15 to 20% in that range?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I think that sounds right. And whether or not you want him or Scott, I think it's going to depend on the team. Again, if you really need speed, Scott could be your answer, all-in-one guy. But if you just need more talent, Will Benson could be quite a lot of talent. And you get him for the whole year, which is another reason why you can throw some real FAAB bids around this time this year. You get 6 months of the guy, not just 2 or 3. Let's move from the big hitters that we're talking about to the biggest pitchers. The one starting pitcher who we think deserves quite a big bid is Garrett Crochet. Again, may have gone last weekend once it was announced that he was the opening day starter for the White Sox, but in leagues where you didn't have an early run, he's definitely still out there, I would think. He wasn't getting a lot of buzz in early draft season, and in 12-team leagues, I think we got to be considering Garrett Crochet as well. He's the ace for the White Sox. So how far are we going on the ace for the White Sox?
Yeah, 15% sounds about right, I think. The upside, pretty high, but I mean, he's pitched, 25 innings last year and 0 innings the year before that. His opening day start was literally his first ever in pro ball, but he held velocity. He was hitting near 100 and sitting at like 97.5 miles per hour. Got a really good slider. He's got things working against him, certainly. The White Sox team, the workload issues, the not a great park to pitch in, but there's definitely upside there, and I think he's at least 15% of your FAAB budget, probably.
Yeah, I could see it. I love it as a talent. I'm a little bit nervous about how many starts can I even say with a straight face I think he's going to get more than 20 starts? And 20 is a really low number, but like you said, he's worked exclusively as a reliever. So it looks like Abner Uribe is the guy in Milwaukee. They've had 2 saves in their first 2 games, and pretty uncomplicatedly, it was Abner Uribe in the 9th both times. I think it was Trevor McGill in the 7th both times. Joel Payamps got the 8th one time, and I forget who got it today, but it was not him. But Uribe couldn't be used more like a closer through these first 2 games. So are you just going to bid on him as if you're getting 3 months worth of the Brewers closer until Devin Williams comes back?
I think you have to. Pat Murphy was cagey about what he might do going into the season, but he's, actions speak louder than words, and there's no reason to believe it's anyone other than Uribe currently. And Devin Williams is going to miss, as you mentioned, at least 3 months, and that's the kind of injury that you could certainly see a setback. It might wind up being just a lost year for him. Hopefully it's not, and he certainly should get that job back when he is healthy, if he is healthy. Uribe certainly looks like a closer in waiting, and he could be a potential lockdown guy. So if you're thinking about 3 months worth of saves for a potentially elite-ish arm, I think that's worth a pretty healthy FAAB bid.
Talking 15-20% or something?
Yeah.
Even in a 12, I guess is the question too, because he will have been grabbed in some 15s.
Yeah, I think so, at least. I generally spend most of my FAAB dollars on closers early in the season. This is the time of the year when you can get the most value for the full season for them.
Is Jason Foley maybe a closer? Sure, pitched like one on the opening day save for the Tigers. And Foley was throwing over 100 miles per hour sinkers. He sure looked like a closer. How are you reading this one?
Yeah, and AJ Hinch said earlier today that he had Foley kind of pegged for a certain part of the lineup, and it just worked out that way. But then we also saw Alex Lang today. He threw, I think, 24 pitches and only threw a third of them for strikes and got 1 out, I believe.
Sounds about right.
So, yeah, and I didn't see how that game wound up at the end, if it's concluded by now, but I haven't seen if Foley pitched in that one or not yet. But he certainly looks like the guy at the top of the pecking order. He's not a guy who gets a ton of swings and misses, surprisingly, for a guy who throws that hard, but keeps the ball on the ground, and I think there's a decent chance he is their best reliever, and it's certainly the early indications are he's at the top of the pecking order.
The potential for saves for 6 full months, but also with the situation in Detroit as you described, versus Abner Uribe, who probably only has the job for 3 months, but seems to have a firmer handle on it. Who are you throwing more money on this weekend?
Uribe, and I just think he's the better pitcher too. So, if I'm going 15+% on Uribe, it's probably more like 10 on Foley, I would say.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Foley too, we can't forget that in the previous seasons, not a big strikeout guy, under 20% all 3 years. So hasn't looked like a closer before, could still do that, but might just be the top of a committee. 2 more closers. Kevin Ginkel, a temporary closer in Arizona with Paul Sewald on the shelf. How many months worth of saves are we bidding on with Kevin Ginkel, I guess, and that will determine how much we're bidding on it.
1, I mean, it's a grade 2 strain, I believe, of the oblique for Sewald. So looking probably at minimum 3 to 4 weeks, I would say, maybe more. Good thing with Ginkel is he's basically, they came out and said that he's going to be the one who gets the saves. And we know that he's quite good. Certainly showed that in the playoffs last year, had a really good regular season as well. I would prioritize him ahead of Foley, I think, just because we know that he's going to get the saves for a month. And the Detroit situation's a little dicier. If we're going pecking order of the 3 so far, I would go Uribe, Ginkel, and then Foley.
So that's putting Ginkel at like a 11, 12, 13%.
Yeah, I think that's about right.
Yeah, it feels expensive when we're talking about a guy who could become a setup man that you want to drop in, May 3rd or something like that. But if there's at least a possibility, right, that the Diamondbacks stick with something like a committee and Ginkel continues to get some saves after Sewald comes back. So I hear you there. One final closer in the big expensive buys section, Griffin Jax. He was getting drafted in late, or I guess picked up in 15-team leagues, but he should still be available in ones that are doing their first FAAB this weekend, and he should get some number of saves. It looks like he's definitely the guy in Minnesota with Yohan Duran out. How would you pick up Jax? What kind of money would you throw on him compared to Kevin Ginkel? Similar situation.
I think it's about in the same range. Probably rank him a little ahead of Foley, around the Ginkel range. And there's a 0% chance that Jax is going to keep the job once Duran comes back.
Right.
I think, though, it probably falls in about the same range, probably the 10 to 12%-ish.
Yeah, I think it's tougher to do there. So maybe I would make sure that I'd a little bit lower on him than the other guys, so that if I manage to be the top bid on all of them, he's the one I don't get. But, if you're searching for saves, you got to pay the price for saves.